I want to come to perhaps what is going to be the most controversial chapter in the book, and you end with that, no country for strong men. I mean, the assumption maybe till a few months ago was that this was a done deal. 2019 was a done deal, and that Prime Minister Modi would return to power. And I don't know how it's going to turn out, but there are more questions today in comparison to what we saw a few months ago. Why do you believe that, this... You talk to people and they say we want somebody who's a tough decision maker, almost sort of who takes the command and control of a situation and so on and so forth. Why do you think that is not likely to work?
They say that, but I think deep down, as far as the Indians are concerned, as I said, there's a tendency to root for the underdog. I think that exists in most societies and especially here, so like in India. But the reason I say that is not against any particular person, but the fact that I believe that democracy in India is thriving, and that, like at a time when we talk about a democratic recession in the world, where democracy is in retreat in so many countries and in places from Europe to even parts of Latin America, I think the fact that democracy is doing so well in India, to me, is the bullish message of the book.
That's what makes you optimistic?
Yeah, that's what makes me optimistic. And why do I say that? I say that for a few reasons. The main reason I say that this is no country for strong men has to do with the fact that I think that democracy is really thriving in this country, and given the diversity of this nation, it's very difficult for one leader to dominate this country in a very big way. And therefore, in India's entire democratic history, no party at the center has ever been able to get more than 50% of the vote share. And that for me is a telling statistic. And now it seems like almost 30-35% has become the ceiling for that. Whether it's the Congress in the past or the BJP, it's very hard to break that. So what that's really telling you is that it's very hard for one leader to completely dominate like this nation, given the diversity of this country. And the other sort of big bullish message of this book is that I feel so good about the fact that when there's so much angst in the world about how democracy is in retreat and these terms like democratic recession are used all over the pages.
It's thriving in India.
Yeah, of foreign policy magazines, that it is thriving in India, and there's some good evidence to back that up. One, as I said, is that the fact that we're going to have such a competitive election,
which no one would have thought was like the likely outcome at least a few months ago.
Or quite the opposite. Many people were in despair, like about 12 to 18 months ago, many liberals in particular, thinking that this country is going towards strongman rule. All the comparisons with Putin, Erdogan, Modi, etc. were sort of running thick. But the fact that you're able to have such a competitive election today speaks volumes about how deeply rooted democracy is in this country. And the fact that the incumbent in this country so often ends up losing elections, even though the incumbent enjoys incredible advantages, the most being money power. That, as you well know, that in like Indian elections, money plays a big role, or is supposed to play a big role. Typically, the incumbent ends up outspending the opponent by a ratio of 5 to 1, if not 10 to 1.
Wow.
And this government has, at the center, has done that. I mean, the BJP, even in Madhya Pradesh when we went, even other states like Bihar in 2015, the spending advantage was incredible. But yet, the opposition was able to win. So the fact that despite all that money, despite the fact that they have such incredible sway over decision-making in terms of, with corporates, and the fact that they have a fair amount of sway with the media, I think the fact that the incumbent still loses, and even this government faces such a competitive election now, speaks volumes for how powerful democracy in this country is.
Speaking of strong men, and you write about your encounters with Prime Minister Modi a few times that you've met him, and they haven't all ended well. They perhaps started well but didn't end well. There's been no attempt to reach out to him post that?
I think that, he sort of at some point in time, for good or for bad, took the view that this group keeps raising the issue of Gujarat riots maybe a bit too much. And so I think that that's really what led to this sort of,
acrimonious parting.
Yeah.
And it was an acrimonious parting.
Yeah. I mean, you can say that.
Yeah,
yes,
he walked out.
Yeah, in terms of, well, after spending some time with us, but yeah. So I think that really has, what ended up being, as far as the issue is concerned. But subsequently, we have, met other BJP leaders, including Amit Shah, a couple of times. And yes, these meetings do tend to be a sort of, much more rough. But, like the only thing which I will say to these leaders is that even if you take the example of Trump in America, I find it quite remarkable that Trump also tends to be very hostile towards the media. Just look at the way he sort of, has this absolutely bitter accounts with the media in public.
Yeah.
And in private, whether it's the New York Times or CNN, he's trying his best to quote them. He like engages with them. He wants to still give interviews with them. He still wants to be liked by that crowd. And so I just wish that we'd have a similar sort of atmosphere here, where it's fine to have a public posturing also if you need to. But at the end of it, you want to sit down and you want to sort of have a conversation, even if the person happens to be an opponent. And I believe that in the BJP too, there are basically sort of, two sides to the BJP too. There are many leaders in the BJP who are like that. Whether it's got to do with Rajnath Singh, Nitin Gadkari, even to do with Sushma Swaraj. These are all leaders who may sort of not like your ideological views, but at a personal level, they'll be very happy to engage with you. And I think that that's the way I would like politics in this country to return. Instead, we are in this very polarized environment where if you end up saying something which sounds, as if you're taking sides, which may not be, it may just be like analysis, then you end up sort of being seen as someone who's hostile to the other side. And so therefore, my only plea to the current leadership would be the fact that, let's engage at a private level. Even if at a public level it suits you to posture against the media.
Well, I don't know if anything's going to come of that or not, but let me ask you, Ruchir, you said that, you at the end of this book and all of your travels, you're optimistic about electoral democracy in this country, and you believe that it's thriving as opposed to what we're seeing happen in the rest of the world. But what about India in general, and specifically about the Indian economy? How confident and optimistic do you feel about the Indian economy today?
I think that as far as India is concerned, my view has long been, and this is, right from the time I wrote my first book, that we're never going to be able to be like China, because we just don't have the appetite for taking those kind of economic decisions. And there's one way that you can look at it, that China never created a welfare state until it really created a very well-developed infrastructure. So it invested record amounts in roads, bridges, ports. That's where it completely featured. It was almost a form of ruthless capitalism that they followed. In India, unfortunately, we are now building a welfare state well before we have the means to do so. And what that means is the fact that the money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that money will end up getting sucked out of the kind of expenditure which leads to higher growth rates in the future. So that's just the reality of India. So I think as far as India is concerned, this entire dream of growing at 8-10% China-type growth rates, I don't think is going to be realized anytime soon. The good news, having said that, is the fact that the private sector is sufficiently open and liberalized enough to sort of carry the country forward in terms of what it's doing. And I feel that the institutional quality is still very much there, where you will not see a complete breakdown in the situation like in this country in terms of law and order, or to even do with runaway populism. Like the big risk that I think is increasing, but I still don't feel that we are there as yet, is if we end up having complete runaway populism out here. I still feel the institutional quality is good enough to keep that in some check, to keep some check and balance over that.
So let me end then by asking you, Ruchir, over the last 25 years, all your encounters with political leaders, which are the ones that have been most memorable, the ones that have surprised you?
A common feature in the book is the fact, when I was speaking to my American editors, what surprised them the most was the unusual intimacy that they got to see between the leaders and us, or even the voters. For example, in the book, I have 4 encounters where we have met with politicians in their bedrooms. Starting with Mayawati in 2002, Lalu Prasad Yadav in 2005, Ram Vilas Paswan in 2014, and in 2016, when we met Captain Vijay
On his bed, not just in his bedroom.
And that was possibly one of the sort of most entertaining encounters we have had with any politician, where we were able to barge into his hotel room to have a conversation with him, and there he is, and we have some photographs of that, trying to cover himself up in the sheets to apparently hide his modesty, but but also sort of so endearing to be able to meet us like in that sort of format. So I think that that's what really makes these trips so special, about seeing that side of India, like about seeing this intimacy and seeing the warm hospitality that people extend to you. Like anywhere you go, immediately the food is rolled out. So we've had some amazing food experiences on these trips.
Yeah.
Like people in my group remember that, the best samosas we ever had were at Lalu's place. The best laddus we ever had were at Mulayam's place. So you remember this. The best food we have ever had was in Madurai in terms of the Chettinad cuisine. So it's that part, and that's what I've tried to do in the book. That how does India smell? How does India feel when you're traveling in these places? Now, of course, sometimes you have to make do with no meals also. I mean, one rule I have on the trips is that you don't have any lunch because of the fact that we want to cover as much
ground as possible.
And the moment you have lunches, they end up become 2-3 hour expeditions. So I'd say a lot of great encounters with politicians. At the end of the day, I come back respecting politicians more after these trips, even though we love to sit back in our living rooms and hurl a lot of abuses at them. Yes, I think there's a lot broken with the state. There's a lot more that can be achieved. But at an individual level, when you meet them, you come away feeling much more charmed by them than sort of being appalled by them. And so for me, that's one of the more positive messages of the book.
Would you ever consider getting into active politics yourself?
Oh no! No. I mean, in terms of, I think
just an observer.
Yeah, exactly. I think that this political system here is not very friendly to outsiders. So I think that for all the reasons we have discussed, whether it's got to do with dynasties or just the fact. Also, the other fact I feel is that just how big the constituency sizes are in this country. That for a new person to paradrop in and to make an impact is just so difficult, because the size of the constituency, when I tell, like the size of many small countries at a parliamentary level, and even at an assembly level at times. But at a parliamentary level, it's so big. So it is so difficult for you to paradrop into the system and to sort of either win or even make an impact. So I think that I'm best served by observing these great tales that we get to see of democracy in India, and also the fact that this is my true love, and why would I want to give it up to actually go and do something else?
Well, yeah, fair point. But the question that everyone is asking: what in 2019?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, everyone's going to ask that question. I think that as far as that's concerned, as I said, that every scenario is in play. And that is very different from what the situation was a year ago. A year ago, it was considered a near certainty that Modi was going to be re-elected. Today, I think every scenario is genuinely in play, or whether he comes back, like all these Delhi theories, or what happens in terms of the fact that the BJP gets less than X. Do they have some other leader, or you end up getting, an opposition comes to power. But just look at India's history, which is that it is so difficult to predict who will be the next Prime Minister, because very few could have predicted Narasimha Rao, Manmohan Singh, Dev Gowda. Just very difficult to predict in terms of who will be the next Prime Minister, because this is a true parliamentary democracy, and
even though we want to look at it as a presidential election.
No, but who's we? I'm not sure. As I said,
that's the
maybe
popular narrative today.
Yeah, maybe in Delhi, Bombay, and some of the foreign investors like to think of this as a presidential kind of, election. But really, if you come here and talk to people, everyone's sort of looking at their sort of, their local allegiances. So I think this presidential narrative is a very simplistic narrative at the center.
Well, Richard, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us. We wish you the very best of luck with your latest book, and we hope that you continue to enjoy your travels across India.
Yes, I'll be back on the road in end April 2019.
And we look forward to hearing from you about that trip as well. But for now, from all of us here on the road to democracy, thanks very much for watching. We'll sign off from Bijnor. See you later.